In 1974, a masked man broke into a home in Sacramento, tied up a couple, and assaulted them at gunpoint. Over the next 12 years, the same man would terrorize California. 50 rapes, 13 murders, over 100 burglaries. Police had his DNA. They had his fingerprints. They had surviving witnesses. And for 40 years, they had absolutely nothing else. Then in 2018, a retired detective uploaded a DNA profile to a free genealogy website. 72 hours later, they had a name. That name was Joseph DeAngelo. And his arrest didn't just close one case, it launched a revolution that's rewriting the rules of criminal justice. This video is about the cold cases that science cracked wide open. Murders and disappearances that sat unsolved for 10, 20, even 30 years. Cases where the killer thought they'd gotten away with it. Cases where families had given up hope. And then a technique called investigative genetic genealogy changed everything. We're going to look at 3 cases where DNA genealogy caught killers who thought time was on their side. And I'll explain exactly how this technology works. Because the method itself is almost as wild as the cases it's solving. If you watched our last video on forensic mistakes that let killers walk free, consider this the other side of the coin. Science failed those cases. In these cases, science came back with a vengeance. Joseph DeAngelo lived a quiet life in Citrus Heights, California. He mowed his lawn. He yelled at his neighbors. He was a 72-year-old grandfather and former police officer. He was also the most prolific serial predator in California history. Between 1974 and 1986, DeAngelo operated under at least 3 identities: the Visalia ransacker, the East Area rapist, and the original Night Stalker. Law enforcement didn't even realize these were the same person until DNA linked the cases in 2001. But knowing the crimes were connected didn't reveal who did them. The DNA sat in a database, matching nothing, for 17 more years. Enter Paul Holes, a cold case investigator for Contra Costa County. In 2018, Holes was months from retirement when he tried something radical. He uploaded the killer's DNA profile to GEDmatch, a free public genealogy database where people voluntarily share their DNA to find relatives. The profile didn't match the killer directly, but it matched distant relatives, 3rd and 4th cousins. From there, a genealogist named Barbara Ray Venter built family trees backwards, hundreds of branches, thousands of names. She cross-referenced locations, ages, and timelines until the tree narrowed to a single suspect. DeAngelo was arrested on April 24, 2018. Investigators confirmed his identity by swabbing DNA from his car door handle and the trash outside his house. In 2020, he pled guilty to 13 counts of first-degree murder and admitted to dozens of rapes. He's serving life without parole. This was the case that proved the concept. If you could catch the Golden State Killer, a man who'd evaded detection for 4 decades, you could catch anyone. In 1985, a hunter stumbled across a steel barrel in Bear Brook State Park, New Hampshire. Inside were the remains of a woman and a young girl. No identification, no missing persons match. The case went cold. 15 years later, in 2000, a second barrel was found, just 100 feet from the first. 2 more sets of remains, 2 more children, 4 victims, 0 names, 0 suspects. For decades, they were known only as the Bear Brook 4. The break came from an entirely different case. In 2002, a man named Larry Vanner died of a heart attack in California. His daughter, Lisa, a woman he'd raised since childhood, submitted her DNA to a genealogy site to learn about her family. What she learned destroyed everything she thought she knew. Lisa wasn't his biological daughter. Her real name was Dawn Bowden, and she'd been reported missing from a trailer in Manchester, New Hampshire, in 1981, along with her mother. Investigators realized Larry Vanner wasn't even his real name. Through DNA genealogy, they identified him as Terry Rasmussen, a drifter with a violent history spanning decades and multiple states. Using the same genetic genealogy techniques, the Bear Brook victims were finally identified. The woman was Marlise Honeychurch. The children were her daughters Marie and Sarah, along with a 3rd child, who Rasmussen had fathered. Rasmussen killed them all, and if he hadn't died in 2002, he might never have been caught. This case is staggering because DNA genealogy didn't just identify the killer, it identified the victims. 4 people who'd been nameless for over 30 years finally got their names back. On April 1, 1988, 8-year-old April Tinsley was walking home from a friend's house in Fort Wayne, Indiana. She never made it. Her body was found 3 days later in a ditch. She'd been assaulted and suffocated. The case gripped the city, but leads dried up fast. Then, the killer started taunting police. In 1990, someone scrawled a message on a barn near the crime scene. "I kill 8-year-old April Marie Tinsley. I will kill again." The misspelling of her last name was noted. In 2004, the taunting escalated. Handwritten notes appeared on the bicycles of young girls in the same neighborhood. The notes contained graphic threats, and investigators recovered DNA from the envelopes and the notes themselves. But the DNA didn't match anyone in law enforcement databases. For 14 more years, the case sat open. In 2018, the same year D'Angelo was caught, Fort Wayne investigators used the same approach. The killer's DNA was uploaded to a genealogy database. The family tree narrowed to a man named John Miller, a 59-year-old living just 15 miles from where April was killed. He'd been there the entire time. Investigators surveilled Miller and collected his DNA from items in his trash. It was a perfect match. Miller confessed and pled guilty. He's now serving 80 years in prison. April Tinsley's mother, Janet, waited 30 years for that arrest. She told reporters that she could finally sleep. So how does investigative genetic genealogy actually work? It starts with crime scene DNA. Investigators create a genetic profile and upload it to a public genealogy database. GEDmatch and family tree DNA are the two that allow law enforcement use. The database returns partial matches, not the suspect, but their relatives. Third cousins, fourth cousins, sometimes even more distant. From those matches, genealogists build sprawling family trees, sometimes going back to the 1800s. Then, they work forward, narrowing the tree by age, gender, location, and criminal history until they land on a suspect. Investigators still need to confirm with a direct DNA comparison, usually collected from trash, a car door, or a discarded coffee cup. Since 2018, this technique has been used to solve over 500 cold cases in the United States alone. Rape kits sitting untested for decades are finally being processed. Unidentified remains, some dating back 50 years, are getting names. But it raises real questions. The people in those genealogy databases consented to share their DNA for ancestry purposes, not criminal investigations. You might never have submitted your DNA anywhere, but if your third cousin did, you're effectively in the system. The debate over genetic privacy is far from settled. But for the families in these cases, families who waited 10, 20, 30 years for answers, the technology delivered something the justice system couldn't: closure. If our last video showed you how badly forensic science can fail, this one shows what happens when it works. And these 3 cases are just the beginning. There are thousands of cold cases being re-examined right now with DNA genealogy. Which cold case do you want us to cover next? Drop it in the comments. We read every single one. If this is your first time here, we cover forensic science and criminal justice every week. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if this video made you think twice about DNA and privacy, hit that like button. It helps more people find this channel. See you in the next one.